Welcome, everyone. We are so happy that you are here today. I'm Katrina from Fisher Vista. Let me just do a quick few things. Marin and Mark are going to be talking for about 30 to 45 minutes. That's the talking part of the presentation. So um, please be ready for that. Use the console to ask questions. Go ahead and type them in all throughout. If we don't get a chance to answer your question, we'll answer them after the webinar. So please keep them coming. We love them, and there'll be time at the end for questions. If you're the Twittering type, and we hope you are, and want to connect with your fellow webinar participants and tweet out about this event, we're going to be using Twitter hashtag HR Trends. So use it to comment during the session, as well as to follow what other people are saying. 1 to 2 days following the webinar, right, we will send you an email with a link to the recording. So for everyone who might want to, don't worry about taking notes unless you want to take your own. We will send these to you afterwards. So this is going to be great. Let me just do a quick introduction of our presenters today. Marin Hogan is the CEO of Red Branch Media. With over 14 years of marketing experience and as a community builder in the HR and recruiting industry, Hogan has built successful online communities and been a prolific contributor of thought leadership in the global recruitment and talent space. You'll be hearing that thought leadership today, and you're really going to enjoy it. Her clients include Fortune 500 companies and SMBs around the globe. Now, what's Red Branch Media? It's a full-service marketing and advertising agency for HR and recruiting technology and services, including employer branding, recruitment marketing, and technology selection. From social media to strategy and operations, Red Branch is a complete outsourced marketing solution. So Mark Williman, welcome. Mark's career spans 20+ years in the B2B marketing and software product development, including successful marketing stints at Johnson & Johnson and a breakout HR technology firm. Mark is the founder of Fisher Vista. Fisher Vista has helped companies improve their brand awareness and marketing credibility for 15 years. So Mark, we're going to go ahead and get the party started. We'll be talking today about trends that findings from our survey, and talking about trends and predictions for 2016. You'll see a URL for our survey, and I urge everybody, and you'll also get it in an email afterwards, everybody to go and check it out if you want the details and you want to see all the other findings we're just going to be focusing on 4. So welcome to the two of you, and Mark, over to you.
Thanks, Katrina. Hi, everyone. So Marin and I are going to go take you through what we thought were 5 of the more interesting findings from the survey. So if you haven't read the survey, please do so. There are actually a lot of questions we asked. There's more than 5, but we picked these 5 for today because they're kind of interesting as far as the what the buyers were saying. So we're going to go through these 5, and then we'll have a Q&A session for all of your sessions. So let's advance the slides and get going to the first question that we asked in this year's survey. So since our first buying research survey, that was, my gosh, nearly 10 years ago, we've asked the question, how do you begin your research for HR solutions? We've asked this, of course, to HR buyers. And for the first several years, which was no surprise, peers ranked #1. And in other research I had read over the years, it was always peers. Then with the surge of the internet and increased usage, search engine took over as a #1 response. This was about, gosh, I'd say 5, 6 years ago, and remained there until this year, which was really interesting. So why did so many more buyers choose Ask a Peer this year? Well, we believe it's because the HR marketplace has become so crowded and cluttered. So it's crowded because there are so many more vendors today than ever. So much for that consolidation myth we used to read about. And the reason it's so crowded, we think, is because, first of all, there's lower entry barriers with cloud computing. Anybody with a computer and a couple of programmers can put something up. And 2, there really is a growing demand for HR solutions. And the marketplace is cluttered because of content marketing and social. Everybody is a publisher today. So frankly, the buyers are a little bit overwhelmed, and a search for employee background screening companies, as an example, on Google, you can go do it, returns 1 million results. So buyers are struggling to sort through the marketing noise, leading them to turn back to peers whose opinions they trust. So what does this mean to your marketing as we go to the next slide? And a number of things, but mainly the obvious is consider creating more use case studies or showing how companies are using your products to solve real business challenges. You can also look for opportunities to have your clients, HR decision makers, co-present with you at conferences or webinars like we're doing today. Any tactic that brings the HR professional into your conversation is going to be good in this climate. Maren, what do you think?
Well, when I first saw this particular slide, I was really surprised. It doesn't seem like this was going to be the thing that took over search engines, particularly as you're hearing so much about SEO and SEM. But as I started to dig in and look at some of your marketing take off of that finding, I had a couple of predictions that I thought of. We're seeing a lot of customers call Red Branch Media based on word of mouth recommendations, and that's more than in years past. Now, granted, we're a marketing agency and we're working with recruiting and HR folks, but for the most part, I think we can say that that's an accurate statement of how B2B customers are finding vendors. It's important not just because I want to brag, obviously, but because if B2B companies are doing this, they should understand and expect that their clients are going to do it as well. The weird part is, while many smaller companies who are not in competitive niches readily share information, a lot of vetting is done in private Facebook groups, during hallway time, at conferences, which we've all attended, and in email newsletter chains. What I think is interesting about this is because we're going back a little bit to, again, it sort of reflects what you're seeing in the survey, right? People are turning to their peers, but now that's sort of accelerated by social, right? I don't have to just talk to my peers when I see them at a conference or my peers in the hallway at my organization. I can go onto a Facebook group. There's one I think that Jennifer McClure started called the Personnel Department. And people ask all kinds of questions in there, just really trying to get help from people who have had the same issues or trying to figure out what vendors they can trust and which ones are full of hot air. Like you said, anybody with a group of programmers and a little bit of imagination can put up a product or at least vaporware. While this informal yelping of businesses may seem a little bit silly, I predict it's going to become more formalized in our immediate future. People want to know if a company is trustworthy before they jump into bed with them. The only place I don't see this playing out en masse is in the Fortune 1000 set. They tend not to want to share what tools they're using, especially if they're successful, which can be so frustrating to marketers. And of course, it can impact those of us who are marketing to the enterprise. It's also difficult sometimes, as you well know, to get people to work with you on case studies if they're a very large company with a very large brand and probably with a very large legal department. I think Mark's idea of use cases and case studies here is a great one, and companies should consider adding some form of publicity verbiage to their SLA for marketing purposes, if at all possible.
Yeah, that is always a challenge in the HR space. It's funny, people have no problems bragging about on the internet their great, new marketing buy, but they have a difficult time talking about the HR services. So let's move on now to the second question of this webinar. And this question is, how important is familiarity with the vendor's brand when purchasing, as you can see, various products or services, or including them in an RFP? So this was a new question this year. We had never asked it quite like this and broke it out by all kinds of different product categories. And what we found was that the importance of brand familiarity varies by product category. What's notable is brand familiarity is more important for products that are associated, right or wrong, with some sort of risk or compliance, such as payroll services. Now, intuitively, it kind of makes sense, since the risks are higher when a bad choice is made with a payroll service as opposed to other types of HR products and services. So compare this to video interviewing, and I want to state we're not picking on video interviewing. It was just an obvious outlier in the survey, so we wanted to bring it in to the conversation. Few buyers, comparatively speaking to other product categories, cared very much about brand familiarity when making a purchasing decision for a video interviewing technology. Now, part of this is because the category is so new. It's really exploded the last 3 to 5 years. But what this tells us is that a large segment of buyers still aren't seeing a difference amongst providers and/or don't value those differences. Now, it's not unique to HR. Other product categories have been dealing with this quote-unquote commodity issue for years. Anybody in the business of employee assistance programs or EAPs knows this very well. So if we go on to the next slide, the real question that we need to ask ourselves is, what do you do if you find your brand in a category where brand familiarity is not valued? Well, first, it's not enough to just have brand visibility. Your marketing must clearly differentiate your solution, talk about the importance of it, and how it solves important business challenges. And most importantly, you don't say it outright. Your marketing has to explain why it does matter which provider you choose. And there are some video interviewing companies that have done a really good job at this, where the product that they're selling isn't so much video interviewing anymore, but much more of a strategic talent management solution. And I think that the companies that have went that direction have had more success. So one way to do this is to have messaging and use content marketing to tell those stories about the strategic importance of your solution, perhaps even drawing attention to some proprietary technologies that you may have. So Maren, I know you have lots of experience in working with brands on both sides of this issue. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think this is, again, it's one thing that's really interesting. I'm glad you guys put this question into your survey this year, because this was not something that I was expecting. I think a lot of people come, I'm sure, to Fisher Vista as well as to Red Branch Media talking about, you have one buyer that you're marketing to. And maybe, sure, it's an entry level versus a director or recruiter versus head of compliance, but really they're all in the same department. And this stat shows us, or this set of stats shows us, that couldn't be farther from the truth. So I think your takes are dead on. My predictions are that the ones who scored low on the sort of branding totem pole that we just saw here are having trouble competing for those keywords, either because they don't have the budget or they're late to the game, or both. Video interviewing, as I'm sure you well know, is very difficult to purchase right now. And so it could be a chicken and an egg kind of a thing, right? Maybe brand is important to them because the category is new, because other people are outspending them, etc. We see some of the same stuff in the applicant tracking system game. As the Internet of Things grows, keep in mind that there are only so many services for people to keep track of. So not everyone is an HR tech wonk like you guys, right? Or like me, right? We care about this sort of stuff, and we pay very close attention to who's number one, who's number two, who's number seven. But most people don't do that. Most HR buyers have a lot more important things to do, and this is just one of many vendor selections that they have to make just in time for budget. Some people just want the best service for the best price. I predict there's going to be a giant uptick in companies trying to use SEO as opposed to keywords and PPC to organically rise to the top of the heap, creating probably a little bit more noise than we've even seen to date. Hopefully they'll vet these search engine optimization companies so they appear for searched phrases rather than ranking first for their name, which is a kind of a rookie mistake, and it ends up wasting a lot of cash. People's memories are short. You need to create a long reputation and have word of mouth, which is something we talked about in the first prediction, be something that you need to be the first name on people's lists. And word of mouth only happens when you delight customers. So marketing is going to align much more closely with service in a lot of these vendor organizations. At the same time, I think we're going to see a surge of more in-depth content that actually offers solutions regardless of whether or not someone purchases their technology. So we've seen a lot of templates go out. We're seeing a lot of helpful educational webinars, kind of like this one, that are giving people the knowledge that they need to do their jobs without asking for any upsell on the back end. So I think the real value add for 2016 buyers is going to be that deep knowledge that they're going to get from their vendors, even if they don't make a purchase.
Okay. All right, let's move to the third of the 5 survey questions we're going to discuss today. And this next slide with all these little pie charts on the slide. The question we asked was, how often do you use the following to get HR information? And you can see we listed all sorts of stuff on the survey. So let me just preface this by saying for all the marketing managers on the call today, and for business owners, that it's clearly the most challenging decision a marketer has to make today is how to allocate the marketing budget. I love it because I've been around, what did you say, Katrina, 20 years? It makes me feel old. The decision, used to be fairly simple when I first got into marketing because we had very few options, a dozen or so choices of where to spend our budget. Then in the mid-90s came the internet, and then came social media, and the number of marketing tactics has exploded. Take advertising. The big decision used to be print versus broadcast. Not many people were doing outdoor. And then, selecting amongst the relatively few choices we had. So look at advertising today with digital advertising in the mix. There are thousands of choices. Within that, you have to make decisions about display, pay-per-click, remarketing. Then there's social, and every social platform has their own advertising. And within each platform, there's multiple choices for the type of advertising you want to do. So, and that's just advertising. It's really, really complicated. And what's also changed is the different ways your buyers are consuming information. So as this slide shows, buyers rely on many channels. Now, that seems obvious, but what does it mean to marketing? Because if you go all in on just a few channels with your marketing, it means you're missing a lot of exposure opportunities elsewhere. So as we move to the next slide, we ask ourselves the question, what do we do? And there's no good answer for those people that have their hands on the purse string, because unfortunately you need to be investing in a lot of different channels. Pretty obvious, I know, but there are still too many brands that I come across that are ignoring social, too many brands that have not experimented with social advertising, too many brands not participating in HR conferences. Remember, it's not an expense issue because you don't have to exhibit. You can attend or apply to speak. But the takeaway here for me was you really have to have a multifaceted marketing campaign and just be highly visible in a lot of different places. So Maren, I've seen, you're seen to be everywhere. So I know you buy into this, but what's your advice for the marketers on this one?
Well, I mean, just be me. No, I'm just kidding. In fact, it may seem like I'm everywhere lately, but my travel has gone down significantly. So you're talking about a multifaceted approach. I know many vendors, and I know many speakers. We have kids, we have families, we have lives, we have businesses. So part of it is speaking and attending at conferences. Part of it is being extremely social. Sometimes you pull back and you want to really write a lot about what's going on. And so I think this could be the year that multimedia genuinely hits HR. We have a long-standing tradition of great Twitter chats like T-Chat, NextChat, EV-Chat, and radio shows. The original, I'm going to give a shout out to the original recruiting animal here, followed by Steve Bose's HR Happy Hour, which he does along with Trish and some other really smart people. Drive Through HR. Crystal, Nisha, William are all doing great jobs with some of those. So it's possible that HR professionals are looking for more search-friendly, i.e. not live type stuff. They find and consume it themselves when they need it, which means marketers and those advising folks within vendor companies, they need to provide useful and easily consumable information without actually dumbing it down. So this is something that we're actually experimenting here. Try your hand at video or podcasting or even crowdsourced posts from places like Quora, and even there's some really great HR and recruiting subreddits that I didn't know existed until recently to find out how your market is finding you. The other thing that I think I sort of touched on earlier is that consumable template materials will surge, sort of like I call them Mad Libs for HR. And then prepare to copy consumer and small business focused players like HubSpot, InVision, Groove, Buffer. They're doing amazing things with their blogs, their email marketing, podcasting that people can consume when they need those things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. One of the things you just mentioned, Maren, which I think is so important, is the leveraging or recycling of content. because we are pressed for time. And I'll give you an example. I wrote a blog not the other day. It was about a week ago. Some of you may have read it. It got some good engagement on LinkedIn. It's okay. So you wrote a blog. Now what? How do you promote that blog? Now that was actually a blog I had written for the company's blog. And then a week later, I post the same thing, slightly edited, on LinkedIn Pulse, and slightly edited a little bit more on a few other syndication sites. And of course, it's also material for all of our social channels. And the time investment was significant to write the content, but very little to actually distribute it in a number of places. So always look for ways to create, some premium content throughout the year, but then really leverage it and recycle it. Not enough brands go back to what they've done, touch it up, and push it out into multiple places, and that really helps as well. So let's move on to the fourth. Did you have anything else, Maren, for that one?
No, I just completely agree with you. I think a lot of people are coming to that same conclusion, and it's so easy to, we say reduce, reuse, recycle, from the 90s, and it works with content as well. It's an excellent point.
We're a little ahead of that. We're a little ahead of the curve in California with that stuff. So let's go to the fourth question. So LinkedIn is still the #1 social platform for business. No surprises there. Let's advance to the next slide and ask ourselves the question, what does it mean? So the specific question we asked was, how often do you use the following social platforms for business purposes? Yes, LinkedIn was #1, but it doesn't mean that you ignore the other social channels. We spend a ton of time on social, so this one is always a fun question to dig into and analyze. And again, a little to serve it up properly. What is social? At its core, social is really just another way we communicate and consume information. We watch TV, we listen to the radio, we read newspapers, trade magazines, blogs, all those podcasts and other sources of information Maren just mentioned, and we're on social. So social presents us with an opportunity to learn something new, meet new people, get exposed to new products. I know that personally, some of the most important content I've read I've discovered on social, particularly Twitter. And I've also found useful new products that I'm using now in our business through social, and I've met new people. So the takeaway for marketers is don't ignore social and don't focus on just one social platform. And as we can move ahead to the next slide, because if you're not on social, you're really not a part of this information exchange, and that's the key takeaway. And because the costs of being on social really aren't that significant, I believe every brand should have some social presence. I read a survey just the other day, and I was actually going to comment on it. I haven't done so yet on the blog, about the average amount that brands are spending on social. It was a lot, and I don't believe that you need to spend that much to have a really good social presence. I think in 30 to 60 minutes a day on social, your brand can have a pretty good presence if you do things intelligently and recycle a lot of the content the right way that you've been producing. So Maren, what are your thoughts on just which social channels to be on and how much?
Well, that's a really interesting question because as you know, and as many people listening may know, I started out with a very large social presence. I actually made the decision to pare that down a few years ago, simply in the interest of time. Now we have tools that will automate and post when you need them to at 6 in the morning, even though you're still fast asleep in your bed. Lots of opportunities for people to manage their social better. Like we already sort of discussed a little bit, I think that more people are going to start posting on LinkedIn despite a clear lack of ownership over the content. So that used to be a problem for people. I think about 18 months ago, people were like, no, don't do Pulse, don't do Medium. You don't own your own content. Once that happens, they can use it for anything. And then people simply stopped caring. It just ceased to be an issue for many, with the exception of probably like people who want to be published writers and things like that. As HR buyers, though, become increasingly inundated with content that doesn't meet their expectations for their professional development or basically stuff they need to do their job, I think they're going to begin to cull their networks down even further. So remember back in the day, groups saw sort of a mass exodus when they were over-marketed to, specifically on LinkedIn. I think that's going to start happening, but with individuals, because now, in addition to a lot of the great content that we're seeing, like Mark, I'm in your network, and I see when you post awesome blogs. I also see people talking about the newest Kardashian that was born and putting up inspirational memes. I think they got lost on their way to Facebook. And I think there are going to be other HR buyers, or as I like to call them, business buyers, who find that to be a little too much. And so hopefully, as smart marketers, we do hope that they pull back and start culling their network so they see less of that. I think for those marketing to the HR community, if they focus on developing a community that is well moderated and offers insightful and practical advice, I think everything old is new again. You know, ERE, recruiting blogs, TLNT, HR.com, all of those things are seeing a sort of a renaissance. And so when you can get insightful, practical advice from those backdoor private Facebook groups and HR and recruiting subreddits like we talked about before, rather than having to sort of dig through LinkedIn for any useful nuggets of information, I think that's what's going to happen. And if you don't have time to start your own community, which many people don't, you should seriously consider whether you have that time to put out there. Become a trusted resource in another one. Obviously not one that's manned by one of your competitors, but if you can't find one, join one and start contributing and answering questions where you can and giving value to that group. And then again, I already mentioned it, but an overlooked similar community to LinkedIn where you can really glean a lot of insight and contribute assistance is a site called Quora, which has been around for a while, but we're starting to see a lot of interesting things come out of there, specifically around HR, recruiting, and some of these niche subjects.
Yeah, I just mentioned them, in fact, Maren, in my latest post as a place where a lot of people on the practitioner side are asking questions, especially in recruiting, other aspects of HR too. It's a great opportunity for solution providers to jump in the conversation. So 2 additional comments on some of the things that you just said. Number 1, with LinkedIn Pulse, you need to publish your best content on LinkedIn Pulse, and I know that it's a different audience that engages with it and sees it. When I post on our blog, it's mostly the HR community that's stumbling across it. When I post on LinkedIn Pulse, I'm getting people from all kinds of companies, all in a very diverse geographic location that just really helps with brand visibility. And secondly, and most importantly, is don't be promotional in your content. Those days are over. It turns buyers off. And I'm seeing so many, I said this recently to somebody that people don't blink an eye spending hundreds of dollars an hour on programming, but they settle for like minimum wage content writing. Guys, it doesn't work. It really doesn't, and it comes back to really bite your brand. So, take the time. I'd rather see a brand writing 1 amazing post or piece of content twice a month than 3 posts a week that are just garbage. And most of them, it's the latter that I'm seeing this day in the space, and it doesn't do you any favors. You got to be really non-promotional, really educational. They'll come to you, and they'll figure out the connection to what you do if you really help them become, navigate through a problem or become smarter. So. Anything else on this one, Maren?
No, I would agree with you. I think that we call it 10x content, but you're right. It's got to be your best, longest, most well-researched stuff. It used to be short and sweet, sealed the deal, and I think that's still true with video and some of the other multimedia approaches we talked about. But when it comes to LinkedIn Pulse, people really want they want something a little deeper. And if you're the brand that's supplying that, it will really help.
And by the way, going on LinkedIn Pulse and pasting a URL to your blog post, that's not publishing on LinkedIn Pulse. See that sometimes too.
No, don't do that.
So finding 5, and remember, download the report. We'll give you plenty of chances. I think we're even tweeting the URL to read the whole report. There's some good stuff here, but this is the last one we're going to talk about today. Then we'll take some Q&A. This is always a fun topic to debate, and it's the use of registration forms to get access to content. So if we see on this bar chart, the question we asked was, how likely are you to download content if you have to complete a form? Now, we did a lot of cross-analysis here by type of company, seniority, manager versus VP, We're not going to get into all that now. You can read the report to dig into it, but basically this year's respondents expressed a bit more willingness to fill out forms, but it wasn't anything statistically significant, and forms still remain a barrier to get content. Um, I think my personal take is I think about 80% or more of your content, you shouldn't put a form in front of it. And it depends on how much you're publishing, but and what you're publishing. So what is it? How does this play into your day-to-day marketing? So if we go to the next slide, some of the recommendations is doing away with forms for most of your content, as I just mentioned, using them for premium content, like a webinar, which you have to register for a webinar, and really in-depth content, like a research report, although you'll notice that Fisher Vista chose not to use a form for this research report. It's kind of the culture at Fisher Vista is everything is without a form except for a webinar. But I understand the need to get leads, so I think for very comprehensive research reports and white papers, but everything else should be without a form. And never require a form for a 2-page article. That just annoys people. Yesterday, I completed what was like 15 fields of information to get a white paper on marketing that when I did, I'm not gonna pick on the brand. It's a major CRM provider. That once I got it, it was essentially an advertorial. And after the first couple of paragraphs, I saw their name being mentioned so much, I did a little Command F to see how many times it was in the report. It's like 26, times in a 2-page report. I lost some trust in that brand. It was kind of frustrating. So if you want to grab names, and we all want to grab names of contacts, rely on building your list, like your newsletter lists. You'll see every great blog has a newsletter, subscription, bonus content, and your email. Really simple, not a lot of fields. That'll bring people into your network, and you can start communicating all your other content. And if it's really good and really educational, and you have the call to actions on the sidebars or kind of away from the main content, trust me, the leads will come if the buyer sees the connection to what you do and a pain point they have. So, Maren, what do you think about the use of forms?
Say it ain't so. Lead generation is kind of important for marketers, and so this is probably the only one where, while I think it's great research, and it's certainly true to say that it would potentially prevent 80% of people from downloading content. I'm gonna say I wouldn't agree with taking forms off of content. You're right, certainly, about not making it overly promotional. Everything that we produce at Red Branch, and I think you guys are exactly the same way, we want it to be useful. We want it to be educational. We want an HR buyer to walk away saying, that helped me. So yes, obviously, make sure it's not promotional content. Yes, obviously, make sure it's not, a 2-page article spread out over 13 pages. However, I think the leads are necessary, and the reason I think so is because I'm seeing a lot of our clients and other clients, and I'm hearing it from people coming to us in the first place. They really need qualified leads, and one of the best ways to qualify people is by using smart forms, which all of the major marketing automation players use them, HubSpot being the most notable, Marketo, Eloqua. I think even some of the WordPress form plugins will automatically populate if you're already in the CRM, which can help decrease the burden on somebody who's downloaded more than one thing from your site. But the reason that I think that forms still have a very useful place in business-to-business marketing specifically is because you don't know, right? Very often the person who is going to use the software that you're selling or the service that you're selling is not the person who's going to write the check, and it's not the person who's going to make the decision, and it's not the person who is going to see whatever they create in said software. So HR is very unique in that it has just multiple people that it has to touch with its marketing, and the only way to qualify those people, as far as I know, we're not a data miner, but is to increasingly gate the content so that you can learn a little bit more about them each time. The trick is not to put too much of a burden on your buyer. So I think HR buyers will start using a company email with a prefix like info or vendors as their email address for content, thus avoiding the onslaught of calls they often receive after trying to get like one stat from a white paper to use in a presentation for their kids' third grade class, right? So what happens is I think we're using forms incorrectly. We have the form, it demands the phone number, and the next thing you know, you get 20 phone calls a day from somebody in Ohio. No offense, Ohio. But it's very frustrating, and that's what, I'm not going to pick on the company either. I'm pretty sure I've already bought their solution, and I'm still getting calls nonstop. Smart marketing software that tracks internet behavior and serves up ads, contents, or any additional sort of user-dependent pages will begin to be the norm. And I think it will take some of the drudgery out of filling out those forms for your potential leads. Smart marketers will ask for less and offer more. So when I say less, I mean please don't demand their first and last name and their company and their number of employees and their social security number and their blood type before you give them your white paper. I think their classic lead gen programs will cease to provide qualified leads, right? People are going to start to give fake phone numbers and fake email addresses. Companies will begin to focus on content that's compelling while still extolling the virtues of their products. So ultimately, this trust will lead to HR buyers selecting the product that is right for them, rather than sort of being penned into a solution that maybe possibly could work for them. I think a lot of what people end up doing in the market is purchasing solutions simply because they need it and they can't get a vendor off their back. And I think that really needs to change. I think it's frustrating for the HR buyer because they'll sort of pigeonhole somebody into purchasing when it's not really the right solution for them.
Great. Okay. And Katrina, you'll be happy to know we're right on schedule. I think we're at about 56 minutes, right? I know that's really important to you. So do we have any? That's it. And
we do. We have some great questions, and I'm going to read you. I'm going to read you two questions because they both relate to email, and I'd like you guys to give your thoughts based on how these two go together. So one person would like to know, how much success have you seen with email marketing and HR buyers? What level would you target on the spectrum of executive to directors / managers? So that's about email and also the level within the organization. And then another comment is, my email campaigns don't seem to be getting much traction lately. Is email falling out of favor as an outbound marketing tactic? And if so, what's replacing it? So can you all speak to to what you're seeing in terms of email marketing, what your thoughts are? If there's
we have another hour, right, to answer that question? I mean, and actually, it's a great question. I wish I had all the answers myself. I'll give just my take, and Marin, you can jump in. But there were so many little questions in what you just read, Katrina, that I'm not sure which one to take on. But we do a weekly newsletter, and the engagement's really good because everybody in that newsletter has opted in. And even then, it requires a lot of cleanup. Removing people who haven't opened any of your emails in about 3 months to get the engagement back up. And it's always an engaged list that is the most important thing in email. So in other words, if you go out and you buy, and there's a lot of these out there, you buy 50,000 emails from some email person at like pennies per email, and then you send it out. Of course, you're going to get a ton of unsubscribes, a lot of not opens, and a few people downloading it. So if you're going to play that game, it's a numbers game. Send a lot of emails and hope for a few click-throughs. But in general, yeah, I mean, everybody, the Direct Marketing Magazine or association, that's all over this, and I think it's called DM Magazine. Subscribe to it. It's online. I've seen have the best information on your questions. It is down across the board. So the question really is, what do you use it for? And I'm two things, and I'll turn it over to you, Mary. I think number one, have an organic list that people sign up to on your site to get stuff, because that's always going to do best for you. And then don't hit it too much, but give them really useful non-promotional educational information. Now, as far as a direct email marketing for white papers and other promotions there, well, again, you can buy lists through sites like HR.com, or publishers rent their list. There's a lot of them out there that are ones that have the trade magazines. They're expensive. I think you're going to pay at least 40 or 50 cents per email, but you're going to get some decent downloads, and it's up to you to determine the ROI based on what, how many leads you get, how many you can close, and what the cost of your product is, and does it, exceed what the list rental was. But that's almost like a separate call Marin or call myself type of question because there's so much there. But Marin, what's your take on that stuff?
Well, I mean, I think I would pretty much agree with most of you. Yes, it is down across the board. I think it's the same sort of thing as the forms. I think it's because people are using it wrong. I think buyers, especially maybe a younger generation of buyers, are telling people, I want you to talk to me via email. And the second they get a phone number, they call the phone number. And that is frustrating. It's intrusive. And it's not a great way to market. So if you're finding that you're sending out a lot of emails, you're getting a decent click-through rate and a decent open rate, but you're not really finding that you can qualify the leads via phone, maybe consider that it's that piece, that phone piece that's worked so well for so long that people are finding intrusive nowadays. The second thing I would say is the one question that was asked that we didn't really talk about, and it's because there's not a great answer for the asker. Is what level do you market to? And that's really, really difficult to say without knowing the price of the product, right? So if you're selling a $30 a month product, it's going to be very different than if you're selling a $250,000 annual contract, right? So that's going to change who you talk to. The other thing that's going to change who you talk to is what you're giving them, right? So we send an executive summary to executives, it's so aptly named, but we might send a free trial to a front user because they're going to be using it. They want to see how it works. So that might be middle management. It might be even lower than director level because often people in HR, they find that people are, they purchase a solution and they have a very difficult time with change management and implementing those things, even if they have a consultant or somebody on staff from the vendor. And so they want to know if their people are actually going to use it. I know I do in purchasing things for my business. So I just try to have empathy with the buyer and say, okay, what do they need? I need to know if we buy a new social tool here at Redbridge Media that my people are going to use it. Otherwise, why waste my money? So I imagine that a CHRO is going to do the same exact thing if he's trying a new compensation module or something of the sort. So I wish I had an easy answer. We always send to executives, but it depends on the price point, it depends on the solution, and it depends on the type of content that you're sending out, whether it's a digest with lots of useful little tidbits or an offer to try it free, or some sort of useful information that somebody can say, oh, this is an interesting concept. Hey, check it out, John, and then hand it off to somebody else. I hope that helps.
One of the most complicated questions in marketing and requires a ton of time to really manage a list properly. And Katrina, I know you have a lot of experience with one of the organizations that you work with on this, and would welcome a conversation with somebody to dig deeper. But it's a great question, and I wish we had more time to really, maybe that's a separate webinar to dive into.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the other question, Katrina?
Yeah. So this one's really interesting to both of you, and I'm almost positive I know what it's asking, but let's see here. So a lot of focus on marketing is differentiating the company brand. Are there topical trends? This is really the question. Are there topical trends within the HR community that you're seeing as a pain point for initiating a conversation? For example, recruiting, ACA, compliance, benefits administration. So I think that's a very interesting question to both of you. That is, are there topics that companies are lining up and talking about that are trends that you want to talk about, or that angle in general? So not so much. Yeah, please take it away, Marin.
Yeah, I think I could speak to that a little bit. I know I think Kevin Grossman was one of the first people that I ever heard talk about the correlation between recruiting and retention, and I thought he was full of hot air then. But I've been hearing so many people discuss it more recently that I think I might have been wrong. Retention is coming back onto the shoulders of the recruitment team. So I think that's one thing that's a pain point that people are seeing. Another is time saved. Look, it's not really wholly about price anymore. It used to be about price, but people are getting increasingly frustrated when they see how easy some consumer software is to use. For example, I use it all the time, but like Dropbox and Evernote, they see how simple that is to use in their daily lives, even in their business lives, and then they go over to some clunky, exhausting, takes 4 months to implement something. Even something that's supposed to be sort of an our generation business software like Salesforce, and they find it to be extremely difficult. Now in HR, that's tough because we have a lot of records to take care of and stuff like that. But if you can give people an idea of how long implementation will take and the efficiency of your product and how much time it will save them, that's useful both for the user case that you're trying to say, okay, this will be easier for you to use, and also for whoever's buying it. Because like, hey, you're not paying the salaries of 4 people to try and figure this out for 5 months. The final thing that I've been hearing a lot about is the importance of onboarding and the quality of hire. So those are the 3 things that I think 2016 is really going to focus in on. Mark, did you have anything that you kind of think is popping up in a trend way for you?
Yeah, so let me approach this a little bit differently. And you're right. I agree with everything you said. I'm gonna so there's 3 types of I think trends, and I think the reason you're asking is because you want to market to those trends. You want to be in those
That's exactly
conversations
right. That's exactly why he's
for
asking.
visibility,
Yeah.
and it totally works. And this is actually something we do all the time. So what are the 3 types of trends? There's those trends that are always, and I'm going to really call them popular topics in HR. Big data, right? The Affordable Care Act. For the last 2 years, those have been some of the most mentioned terms in copy that's being written in our space. It's always popular. Millennials is a big one now that kind of fits into that too. My gosh, every week we're reading something about millennials as it relates to HR, hiring, So then, secondly, there's those news stories, and David Meerman Scott pioneered, I think, the newsjacking term. There's those news stories that pop up. Remember when that big article came out in the New York Times about how horrible a place Amazon was to work? Or then somebody gets upset about stack rankings at GE or whatever, and all of a sudden, Marissa Mayer says something that gets everybody up in arms about telecommuting a few years back. And those are like, they arrive and they go away. But the companies that can jump on those conversations quickly get a lot of visibility. I used to work years ago with a work-life company that helped employees as a benefit, find like child care and elder care and things like that. And, when something unfortunate happened, there was an accident in a child care or whatever community, they're like the first to put out this guide of how to make your, child, daycare center, corporate child care center more helpful, made available for free. The next thing you know, they're being interviewed on major, news channels because they were quick to the conversation with educational, not promotional information. So that's the second that's trending. And the third thing you got to keep an eye on is within your product category. So sure, big data is always trending, but if you're not really in the HR technology space, you care more about what might be trending in recruiting and staffing, right? So that's an area you got to really focus on as a trends in your specific niche area. But the key is to then jump in early, commenting, producing content, doing news releases, with educational content. So that's my take on that question. Hope that answers it.
Yeah, thank you, both of you. So here's a question. I think, Mark, I'd like you to start off. You start off and then go over to Marin. It has to do with that brand recognition finding from the survey, and you might want to restate what that was. Are you saying that brand recognition doesn't matter as much in certain categories? Or are you saying that it matters in every channel, but in some its impact is greater than in others? Just looking for clarity on that that finding.
Yeah, so that's exactly what what it means is that, and look at your own buying behavior for different products and services in your consumer, life. There are going to be certain, let's say you're buying a home security system. I don't know, for me, I kind of want to know the name. That's kind of a big deal. I don't want to screw up and not work when someone tries to break into to my house. But there might be other product categories that, I never heard of this brand before. It's on the shelf at Home Depot. Suits me just fine. So that's this classic buying behavior where there's certain types of product categories where it's a different level of relationship you have with the brand, and it's important that the buyer have some recognition and therefore trust with your brand. And in the HR space, yeah, the sad truth is there are some product categories where brand familiarity isn't that important. So I go out and I get 10 solution providers put in my desk. I haven't heard of 9 of them. That's okay. Let's buy this one. That looks pretty good. I like the features. Now you have to, I don't, pretend to know all the categories and exactly what that relationship is, but I think being aware of that and what it potentially means to your marketing, as we spoke about, is the important takeaway, because it changes the way you market. Visibility is important no matter what, but the stories you're telling within your marketing it will be impacted by that question. If that makes sense. Not sure.
Maren, do you want to follow up or clarify on any of that, or should we go to another question?
No, I think I would fully agree with Mark on all of that. So we can get in maybe one more.
Yeah. I have a really tiny one, and then I have a bigger one. So the tiny one, this is to you, Maren, asking just for clarification on some of the resources you were reeling off the top of your head. Similar to LinkedIn, she says Kira, Chora. Do you remember what you were saying? And can you just say those and maybe spell them, because we have a participant who really wants to know what those were?
Sure, it's Quora, Quora, and then another useful one, it's called Reddit, but Reddit is very, very vast, so I would search like HR subreddit or recruiting subreddit. Reddit is spelled R-E-D-D-I-T.
Okay, fabulous, and I'm sure
If somebody's tweeting on the hashtag, put that stuff out there if they could.
Oh yeah, that would be great. Okay, so look, this is a great basic, but I think a terrific takeaway question to wrap it up. So all in all, what are the 2 or 3 key differences in the way I marketed to HR in 2015 versus how I should market in 2016? Thank you for asking that question. Let's, who wants to start with that one? It doesn't have to be Mark.
Well, number one, you need to choose a different agency, either Fisher Vista or Red Branch, right? No, okay.
Red Branch or Fisher Vista? No.
I mean, honestly, I thought what we're going to be going is how do you differ, like over a wider time frame. I think it's not a whole lot of differences, but that's not knowing what you're already doing. It's hard to say whether you should make drastic changes. If there's we talked about this webinar. If you're paying someone $20 a blog post and putting 5 of those out a week and doing a bunch of other things at least I don't think you should be doing, then how it's changing in 2016 is huge, right? Because you got to do a complete 180 with what you're doing. So not knowing what you're doing, I don't know. But I think some of my top level points are really, really great content. If that means less, that's fine. Right? Write really great content that speaks to the pain points of your buyers, does a great job educating, and push it out over a multitude of channels. Again, that whole recycling. And I personally think that size of network isn't as important. I think the early adopters got that one wrong on social when everyone tried to get 100,000 Twitter followers. I think it's much more important to have, and this is why we could do a separate webinar on some of the downsides of automation, but I think that real making connections and really building relationships, and if that means more one-on-ones, so be it, right? I think the ROI is there than just this mass play of chuck a bunch of stuff out there and see who calls. So I think it's using technology intelligently, it's making more individual connections on social, putting out really great content. I think those are 3 that I would list without thinking too deeply about it. Maren, what about you?
I think the 3 that I would make, there are 3 that we're making internally and for our clients is 1, move from what we call rabbit content, which Mark just sort of described, over to more 10x content, which is bigger and broader. It's sort of a marketing term, and we're going back and forth between those 2, but we're really making concerted effort there. The second thing is to provide consumable media or templates for your prospects. I think it's going to be huge this year. And then third, using smart technology to make sure that the burden is lifted off of your prospects and onto your software. So they don't have to give you all of their information because you already have it in some way or another. You can just go move on to the sale. And I'm using that smart technology and not contacting people the way that they want to be contacted. And that means, if that means laying off the phone, it does. If that means laying off the email, it does. But consumers are starting to want their preferences to be respected. So as a marketer, we should be the first ones, as marketers, we should be the first ones to say, this is my preference. Contact me this way. This is how I want to buy. So pay attention.
Yeah, that's really profound. That's really important. We can all relate to that. Um, Fabulous. So we are going to wrap up this webinar. There were many other questions that came in. We thank you for them. We will respond. We'll give you a quick email back with our thoughts if we didn't answer them. Thanks everyone for joining us, for spending time with us. And Mark and Maren, thank you both for the lively discussion, and it was very provocative and interesting. So thanks to everyone. Again, you'll get an email with us from with a link to the recording and also a couple of other links of helpful places we think, the survey and other things you might find helpful. So thanks for attending. Thank you, presenters, and everyone. Go forth, enjoy the rest of the day, and thanks for coming. Bye-bye.
Thanks. It was fun. Bye-bye.
Great.
Bye.